studio?
Yeah.
Which one?
First one.
Oh yeah. 101X.
Yes.
Yeah. That was good actually.
Cool.
I was still sparky then. Don't worry, I'll be right.
You ready?
I'm very talkative.
Okay. So this is just going to be like 5 quick questions. Are you... Okay. Hi, my name's Clay Smith. I'm the literary director of the Texas Book Festival, and I am sitting here with Simon Pegg, the film writer and actor. And Simon, probably most people know him from Shaun of the Dead, but he is also a writer. His book, Nerd Do Well, has been sitting on my nightstand for the past month with the spine pointing out. So I've been waking up to this face every morning for the past month. So please don't put that on your the spine of your next book.
Okay, sorry. You know my wife likes to wake up to that face.
So my first question for you, you know, I don't know much about celebrity memoirs in England, but at least here in America, you've written a book that is a lot more revealing and thoughtful than most celebrity memoirs, and it didn't seem like you really needed to write the book. I just wanted to ask why you decided to write it.
It was a kind of bizarre process, really. I certainly didn't want to write that kind of book. You know, I had no desire to just, you know, bang out 90,000 words just to get the paycheck, you know, because that seems to be a lot of what they are. It's like, I woke up and I went and did this, and then in 19, then I did this, and then, have I finished yet? And I was initially going to write a sort of production journal of the sort of process of writing and creating the films, but it just wasn't very interesting. I was writing it just thinking, this is boring. I was like, what can I say? I went to work, that was it, you know. People kind of assume that it's all glitz and glamour, but it really is a job, and you know, there are some interesting anecdotes there. I could have just dropped a bunch of names and tried to spin funny stories out of, but it just didn't seem, it seemed like I was going, I've got a great job, and isn't it brilliant? When I thought it would be better to write something that was more relatable, more inclusive, you know, and what's more inclusive than sort of childhood experiences, because we can all relate to them. We've all been children, we've all had sort of dreams and aspirations. And the angle I kind of thought might be interesting for this book is to look back on how those dreams and aspirations played out in adult life, and how they affected me as a grown-up. And that felt like there was an angle there. There was something that I could pursue that was worthwhile. It wasn't just a sort of cynical kind of way of making money. You see these books every Christmas, they come out, every person. Even the term celebrity memoir makes me feel a bit sick. I don't want to be a celebrity, and I don't want to write a memoir. So this isn't that. This is a book about me. But it's also shot through with a sort of silly fiction story as well, which I also wanted to write. Because it's about a bombastic, self-aggrandizing sort of idiot. And I thought that made a nice parallel to the book. Well,
and you do write about adolescence really well. Can you talk a bit about the Gloucester Leisure Center and sort of being a nerdy teenager there?
Yeah, the leisure centre in leisure centre, as we say here in the US, the Gloucester Leisure Centre was, I suppose, there are places in my hometown that were a recurring sort of edifices. Edify, that should be the plural of edifices, is not. Like the ABC Theatre, which was eventually turned into a movie theatre where I first saw Star Wars, but it was also the place where my mum first did amateur dramatics, which is what got me in. And I keep going back to the street where that was in the book, St Alday Street. Seems to recur. In the leisure centre, I also was in my first big play, and I also worked as a lifeguard in the pool, and
you pretended to be Superman underwater.
Underwater, I used to go down to the bottom of the. I found out that recently Tom Hanks would get into his pool and breathe through a pipe, and because he wanted to be an astronaut, and he could pretend to be weightless at the bottom of the pool, and so I realised I'm not the only one who used swimming pools to sort of fulfil fantasies. That sounds weird. But that was another place that it was a small town, Gloucester. You know, it's a market town. It's it's most famous, I guess, for Beatrix Potter's The Tailor of Gloucester and a serial killer called Fred West.
Yeah.
So it's not a huge place. There's not that much to do there.
Right.
But nevertheless, a lot of my formative experiences took place there.
Yeah. And then when you were a little bit older, you tried to steel yourself up to watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that means a lot to us around here.
Yeah. I did. Why, you all chainsaw murderers?
Yes.
Yeah, I did. I remember my friend got it on VHS and came around and said, I've got a copy in Saudi Arabia. My dad works on an oil rig. He's got Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Do you want to come see it? And I said no, even though I was like, you know, interested, but I couldn't quite bring myself to go to his house and watch it.
Yeah.
Even though I eventually became a huge horror fan, and American Werewolf was the film that broke my horror cherry. It's a dreadful phrase. But I'm glad I didn't watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre when I was 12. It's a superbly chilling film, and I think my 12-year-old mind would have been extremely disturbed by it. There's a reason why that film has the certification that it does.
Yeah.
It's really disturbing.
Yeah. But I'm also interested because you get a little bit more serious in that part of the book.
Yeah.
And horror clearly means, you know, something important to you, and getting horror right means something important to you. I mean, is that... Can you talk a little bit about 70s horror and whether you have used that, referenced that in your own film writing and acting?
I think, yeah, I mean, I was coming of age, I guess, when the new American horror was sort of appearing, and you know, there was a post-Vietnam kind of movement in horror which kind of killed traditional British horror. The Hammer Studios, which were putting out a lot of the classic sort of like Frankenstein, Dracula movies, or that, you know, the very sort of campy kind of old school British horror, was slightly sort of made redundant by this new wave of American horror from people like John Carpenter and Wes Craven and you know, John Landis. There was a lot more visceral and gory and horrific, and one of those filmmakers was George Romero, who made his amazing sort of debut in '68 with Night of the Living Dead, which was, you know, a seminal piece of cinema, and then 10 years later made Dawn of the Dead, which was subsequently banned in the UK because we had draconian censors who didn't really get it. And that film was legendary when I was a kid. Like, you couldn't get it anywhere. It was like, there's a film where this guy gets his head chopped off by a helicopter and the top comes up like a frisbee, and then there's a bit when a man gets a machete in his head, and we were all talking about it in the playground, and it was the stuff of legend, you know.
Right.
And eventually I saw it and I just loved it. And I thought, what a shame this really cool film was banned, you know.
Yeah. But we tend to think of horror as something sort of schlocky, and it really can comment on, in a really cutting way, to use it.
Nice.
On, you know, tough social issues.
He's really pleased with himself. That cuts in remark. Yeah, no, it can. And it's like, and then in like all sort of like comedy, genre cinema is never really taken seriously because it is by its very nature non-serious. So you rarely see, you know, there's not a best comedy Oscar, there's not a best horror Oscar, because those films are, and still are, even though now they dominate, are considered the B films. They're not, you know, you would have that comes second after The King's Speech, The Social Network, you know.
Right.
If Mark Zuckerberg went crazy with the chainsaw, that film would have never been in the Oscars.
Yeah. So
he might still do it.
He might still do it.
He's highly strong.
So last question: the British version of this book has already been published.
Yes.
Right. So,
but it's in British.
Right. Thankfully. Do you get different questions from UK interviewers than from US ones?
Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose to some degree. It's a while since I did all the press for the British version, because it came out towards the end of last year, and I've done Paul press in between, so it's all a murky mess in my head now. But yeah, there's the different dynamic, I suppose, to the questioning here, because I'm a foreigner here. You know, I'm an interloper, and it's easy to forget that we are foreign to each other. Britain and America have a very close relationship, and that's kind of fundamentally about the fact we speak the same language, you know, and it's quite an odd relationship in a way, because, you know, English is obviously from England, but the place that speaks it the most is about 50 times bigger than England. But it means that we've got this incredible sort of resource for art and culture which we can draw on, which is at once familiar and exotic. You know, when as a kid growing up, I was watching all American TV shows like Starsky and Hutch and Barnum Man, and all the films, the big Hollywood films, all seemed so much more interesting than our own output, you know. And so this book is about someone who has watched America from afar and for a long time, and then found himself sort of coming over and being part of it. So it's also, I think it's like Forrest Gump, that book. It's about a guy, a slightly witless guy you kind of like, who finds himself in situations that he never expected to. Yeah. It's basically, I ripped off Forrest Gump. That book should be called Forrest Gump.
That's the first thing I thought when I read this book.
Yeah.
Well, you did a great job. Thanks for making some time for us.
Thanks very much. Life's like a box of chocolates.
Thank you.
I got a white suit on as well. He had that suit on.